It was one of those quiet afternoons when everything seemed normal. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone. Kelly, my wife, was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. We'd been married for 5 years, and I still found myself admiring her, how she moved, how she smiled when she wasn't paying attention. That day, I felt unusually calm. Work had been easy, and the house was peaceful. We were going to meet my family later, and I was looking forward to it. But something felt off. It wasn't immediate, just a creeping discomfort that grew stronger as the day wore on. It started with her phone. Kelly's texts seemed to be constant, and when she looked at them, her expression changed. There was a quick smile, then the phone would be shoved away. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Just work," or "Nothing important." But I could see the hesitation in her eyes. I didn't want to believe it, but I could feel a shift in her. Kelly had always been private, and I respected that. But lately, she seemed distant. At dinner, she'd often eat while typing on her laptop, barely looking up. The connection we'd had, the one I thought we'd always have, was slipping away. I tried not to think about it. I wasn't the jealous type, but the nagging feeling wouldn't let go. It wasn't just the phone, it was everything. The conversations grew shorter, the laughter faded. I felt like she was somewhere else, a place I wasn't invited. But it wasn't until that afternoon, when the doorbell rang, that I felt the shift deepen. I opened the door to find Noah, my stepbrother, standing there with a six-pack of beer. He had that grin I knew all too well, the one that made him seem like he belonged. "Hey man," he said, brushing past me into the house. "Thought I'd drop by." I wasn't expecting him. But Noah had always been around, even if we weren't close. My dad married his mom when I was 12. We shared family events and sometimes had a drink together. But today, something about him felt different. He was more confident, maybe even a little too comfortable. "Sure, come on in," I said, trying to mask the sudden unease. Kelly smiled at him as he entered, a little too warmly, like they shared an inside joke. I couldn't quite place it, but there was something in the air, something I didn't like. She stood a little too close to him, laughed a little too easily. I watched them exchange glances, and the discomfort in my chest grew heavier. Dinner was quiet. Noah tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but the tension between Kelly and me was palpable. I kept looking at her, searching for some sign, some hint that things were still okay, but all I saw was distance. Afterwards, Noah suggested we go outside for a few beers. I agreed, eager to get away from the tension inside, but as I stepped into the backyard, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already changed, and I had no idea what was about to happen next. We sat in the backyard as the sun went down. Noah opened 2 beers, handed me one, and started talking like everything was normal. His job, the gym, some trip he wanted to take. I nodded, but my attention was on Kelly through the kitchen window. She was washing dishes, looking out every few seconds. Not at me, at him. Noah noticed. "You all right, man?" "Yeah, just tired." He smirked. "You and Kelly good? You seem off lately." That question threw me. We never talked about my marriage. "We're fine," I said quickly. "Cool," he replied, taking a sip. "Just asking." Something in his tone felt wrong. Too casual. He left after a couple of hours. Kelly barely spoke when I came inside. Said she was tired, went straight to bed. No kiss, no good night. After that, Noah started showing up more often, always with some reason, returning a tool, bringing beer, saying he was just nearby. Each time, Kelly's mood changed. She'd do her hair, put on perfume, even change clothes before he arrived. When I asked why she was getting dressed up, she laughed. "Can't I look nice in my own house?" But when I mentioned Noah, she got sharp. "He's your brother. Why are you acting weird about it?" I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure what I was accusing her of, but the thought wouldn't leave me. One Friday, I came home early. Kelly was on the phone, whispering. When she saw me, she straightened up fast. "Oh, hey, babe, just talking to Mom," she said, smiling too wide. I nodded, pretending to believe her. When she went upstairs, I checked her phone. The call wasn't to her mother. The number wasn't saved at all. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, the messages, her mood swings, Noah's sudden appearances. My gut told me something was happening right under my nose. In the morning, while she was in the shower, I wrote the number down. I told myself I wouldn't do anything yet. but I knew I would. I needed to know who she was talking to. The next few days felt like a blur, my mind stuck on that number. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that I was being paranoid, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my chest. Something was happening, and I wasn't blind to it anymore. That Saturday, Kelly went out with her friends. She didn't tell me where they were going, just said it was a girls' day. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to seem controlling, but the silence that followed her departure felt suffocating. I grabbed her phone while she was out. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, and my heart raced as I swiped the screen open. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was just a quick look. No harm. The call log was clear, no messages, but the number was still there, sitting at the top, staring at me like a neon sign. I couldn't stop myself. I typed the number into Google. The search results made my stomach flip. The number belonged to a private account. No name, just a blank profile with a few scattered details that meant nothing to me. It didn't make sense. I stared at the screen, then opened her text messages. The conversation wasn't much, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. The texts were short, cryptic, and always ended with one word: soon. There was nothing overtly incriminating, but the way they spoke to each other was different, too familiar. The unease inside me had escalated into something darker. When Kelly returned a few hours later, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. She walked in, a little too cheerful. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice high-pitched. I nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." She seemed to buy it, or maybe she didn't care. She went upstairs to change, and I sat there, trying to fight the overwhelming urge to confront her, but I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. That night, Noah called. It was late, just after midnight. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. "Hey, man," he said, voice low. "You up?" "Yeah," I replied, tension creeping up my spine. "What's up?" "I need to talk," he said, sounding strange. "It's about Kelly." My heart skipped a beat. "What about Kelly?" There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy silence. "I can't explain it over the phone," Noah said finally. "But you need to know something. Something's been going on. Just meet me tomorrow, okay?" I wasn't sure what he meant, but I agreed. I had to know the truth, no matter what it was. As I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of what was coming. The truth was close now, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I barely slept that night. Noah's call replayed in my head until sunrise. He'd said he needed to tell me something about Kelly. His voice hadn't sounded like a joke. It was serious, almost guilty. I couldn't ignore it. By morning, I decided to meet him. We agreed on a small diner near his place. The drive there felt endless. My thoughts kept circling the same questions. Why would Noah be involved? What did he know about my wife that I didn't? When I walked in, Noah was already there, sitting in a booth by the window. He looked rough, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly as he stirred his coffee. He didn't smile when he saw me. "You said it's about Kelly," I started. "What's going on?" He looked down at his cup. "I should have told you sooner," he said quietly. "I've been seeing things, and doing things I shouldn't have." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Noah took a deep breath. "I messed up. I got close to Kelly, too close." For a moment I thought I misheard him. "What are you talking about?" He met my eyes, and I saw the guilt written all over his face. It started small, talking. Then one night, it went too far. "I didn't plan it, man. I swear I didn't." The words hit me like a punch. My stepbrother, my wife, together. I just sat there, staring at him, waiting for him to take it back. "You're lying," I said, my voice shaking. "I wish I was," he muttered. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to keep lying to you." I stood up. My hands were trembling, my throat dry. I couldn't think straight. The noise of the diner faded out until all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. "I can't do this," I said, turning to leave. Noah didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, staring at the table, while I walked out into the cold air. Driving home, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, just emptiness. When I stepped inside, Kelly was there, smiling like nothing was wrong. For a second, I almost believed her act. But now I knew. I didn't confront her that night. I needed proof, something I could see with my own eyes, because if Noah was telling the truth, everything in my life was about to fall apart. The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog. Every time I looked at Kelly, I saw nothing but the image of her with Noah, those stolen moments, the whispers, the secrecy. I tried to act normal, tried to push the thoughts away, but they were always there, lurking beneath the surface. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more, proof, something concrete. I told myself I was just being rational, that I wasn't jumping to conclusions. But the truth was, I wasn't sure how to process any of it. I spent the next few days keeping to myself, watching her more closely. Kelly didn't seem to notice the shift in me. She was still upbeat, still her usual self, cooking dinner, laughing at her favorite TV shows. If there was guilt in her, she hid it well. I began to track her every move, desperate for a crack in her perfect act. I noticed when she'd spend longer than usual on the phone, or when she'd disappear upstairs, saying she was working or resting. The little things that now seemed like lies. Then it happened. One evening, Kelly went out with her friends again. She hadn't mentioned anything about where they were going, but I didn't question it. I'd been waiting for this moment, hoping for an opportunity. When she was gone, I went straight to her phone, the same one I'd seen her use 1,000 times before. I couldn't believe I was doing this, but I didn't care. I opened her messages first. The same number was there, still unsaved, still flashing at me with the same urgency. I clicked it. The conversation was there, staring back at me. Short, clipped exchanges, nothing overtly sexual, but enough to make my stomach turn. There were mentions of plans, places to meet, always ending with soon. I scrolled through them, feeling the weight of the words pressed down on me. I didn't know what to do with this information. My mind was reeling, the anger bubbling up, but I still held back. This wasn't enough. I needed to hear her say it. I waited for Kelly to come back. When she did, I pretended nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just invaded her privacy. She didn't seem suspicious. In fact, she was in high spirits, chatting away about her night. But inside, I was unraveling. I couldn't keep playing this game. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The truth was slipping out of my control. I wasn't sure what I'd do when I finally confronted her, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The next time I saw her pick up the phone, I knew it would be the moment that changed everything, and I was ready to finally face it. The days dragged on in a haze. Kelly acted like everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Every smile, every glance felt like a lie. I had the proof now, Noah's confession, the texts, the photos, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her. I was paralyzed by the thought of hearing her admit it. What would I do then? But I needed one more thing, a final piece. Kelly left to run errands that evening, and this time I didn't hesitate. I grabbed her phone and went straight to her photos. I scrolled through our pictures, vacations, family gatherings. But then I saw one that stopped me cold. It was a photo of her and Noah, taken a few weeks ago. They were standing too close, his arm around her, her head tilted back in laughter. The way they looked at each other, like they were sharing a secret, I couldn't ignore it. I stared at the photo, feeling the rage and betrayal build inside me. This wasn't just an affair, this was something deeper. The intimacy between them was undeniable. When Kelly came home, I didn't say a word. I just handed her the phone. She looked at it, and the color drained from her face. "Explain this," I said, my voice tight. She didn't speak right away, but I could see it in her eyes, guilt, regret. Then she looked away, swallowing hard. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." My patience was gone. Why him? Why the secret calls, the lies? She closed her eyes, like she was bracing for the worst. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "How long has this been going on?" "Since before the summer," she said, barely above a whisper. The words landed like a punch. I wanted to scream, to shout, but I couldn't. I stood there, stunned, trying to process everything. "I don't know what to say," she continued, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I don't know how it happened, but I don't know how to fix it." I shook my head. You've already made your choice. She reached for me, but I stepped back. No, I said, my voice breaking. I can't do this. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there. The truth was out, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. The days blurred together. Kelly went on as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't stop seeing the betrayal in her eyes. She apologized endlessly, pleading for me to listen, but I couldn't. Words didn't matter anymore. What I'd seen, what I knew, there was no going back. Noah didn't reach out. I kept waiting for him to call, but he never did. Part of me wanted him to explain himself, part of me didn't care. He was the last person I wanted to hear from. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. My mind replayed every moment, every sign I'd missed. How long had this been going on? How long had she been lying? One night, I sat alone in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Kelly was upstairs, probably pretending to sleep. The silence between us was suffocating. I stared at the wall, numb. I didn't know what to do anymore. I pulled out my phone, staring at the last text Noah had sent. I'm sorry, man. I never meant for this. I'll leave if you want, but you deserve the truth. I couldn't decide if I hated him or felt empty. The truth was out, but nothing felt better. I hadn't spoken to Kelly for hours. We weren't fighting, we were just existing in the same space, unable to break through the distance between us. I wanted to know everything, how it started, why it happened. But the thought of asking her made me sick. What good would it do? The questions were already eating me alive. I stood up, a sudden impulse taking over. I had to face it, even if I didn't want to. I knocked on Kelly's door. At first, there was no answer. But after a long pause, I heard her stir inside. She opened the door, eyes red from crying. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice breaking. I stared at her, unsure of what to say. I wanted to scream, demand answers, but I couldn't. I was drowning in this silence between us, in everything left unsaid. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, voice tight. I don't even know if I want to try. Her face crumpled, but she didn't speak. I need time, I added, then turned and walked away. Kelly didn't stop me. She didn't say another word. I went downstairs and sat in the living room, the house feeling emptier than it ever had. I wasn't sure where we went from here, but I knew one thing. Things could never go back to the way they were. The silence between Kelly and me stretched on, heavier than I ever thought possible. I spent most of the next few days barely speaking to her, going through the motions of daily life. But everything felt like a performance. Every word I spoke felt like a lie, every glance at her a reminder of everything I had lost. I stayed in the living room a lot. It was easier that way, away from her, away from the memories that now seemed tainted. When I had to be near her, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. She apologized again and again, but I didn't know what she expected from me. The words didn't mean anything anymore. They were just empty sounds. Noah was still silent, and I found myself torn between wanting to confront him and never seeing him again. I hadn't heard anything from him since our conversation in the diner. I thought about calling him, asking him why. Why did he do this? What did he want? But I didn't. I didn't know what I would say, or even if I wanted to know. Then, one evening, Kelly sat down next to me while I was watching TV. I didn't look at her, but I could feel her presence beside me, the space between us, a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. I can't do this anymore, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I didn't look up, afraid that if I did, I'd fall apart. Do what? I asked, my voice flat, almost distant. Live like this, she replied. I hate this. I hate what I've done to us. I stayed silent for a long time, just listening to her words bounce around in the room. I could tell she was struggling, fighting herself, but I didn't know what she wanted me to say. What could I say? She'd made her choices. Finally, I spoke, the words coming out colder than I intended. You've already made your choice. You don't get to keep apologizing. It doesn't change anything. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't wipe them away. She just stared at me, as if trying to reach through the wall I'd put up between us. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you, she said, almost pleading. I didn't say anything back. I didn't know what was left to say. The silence grew louder, suffocating both of us. She stayed for a while, sitting next to me, but I could tell she was waiting for me to do something, anything. But I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. But another part of me just wanted to escape, to get out of that house and never look back. When she finally stood up, I didn't stop her. She gave me one last look, as if waiting for something, anything, to change. But I didn't move. I was done pretending. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a prison, and I didn't know how much longer I could stay inside it. She left the room, and for the first time in days, I was alone. Days bled into one another, Kelly and I moving through them like strangers. Her apologies filled the space between us, but they didn't matter. The damage was done. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, her and Noah. The house felt suffocating, the silence a constant reminder of the betrayal. Every word she spoke felt distant, as if I were hearing it through water. I hadn't answered Noah's messages. I told myself I didn't need to hear him explain. But I knew deep down I couldn't ignore it forever. I needed answers. Maybe they wouldn't make sense, but I had to know. That night, I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed Noah's number. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Hey," his voice was strained, like he knew this conversation was coming. "Why?" I asked, the words sharp and full of frustration. "Why, Kelly? Why did you do it?" There was silence on the other end, then a long sigh. "I didn't plan it, man. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "Don't give me that," I snapped, the anger boiling up. "You're telling me this was an accident?" "No, I'm not saying that," Noah responded quickly. I don't know, it just happened." I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. "You think I'm stupid?" "No," Noah's voice cracked. "I didn't want this to happen. I never meant to hurt you, but it felt right, and I couldn't stop it." I stood in the middle of the living room, the walls closing in around me. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, "Are you happy?" "No," he said, quieter now. "I don't know what I'm doing. I never wanted any of this." I let the silence stretch out between us, every second a reminder of how much had been destroyed. "You fucked up," I said finally, voice barely a whisper. "But don't expect me to forgive you." "I don't expect that," Noah said. "I just thought you should know. I thought you deserved the truth." I hung up without saying another word, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I had the truth now, but it didn't make anything easier. Noah's confession only added more confusion to the mess. I walked back into the living room, feeling emptier than I had in days. I had answers, but I still didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know how to fix this, if it could be fixed, but one thing was certain. I couldn't keep pretending. The truth was out, but it was just the beginning of what came next, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Kelly and I barely spoke. Her apologies came constantly, but I couldn't bring myself to care. She could beg for forgiveness all she wanted, but it wouldn't change anything. What we had was gone, shattered beyond repair. I stayed out of the house as much as possible, working late, going to the gym, even grabbing coffee in places I didn't care about, anything to avoid the silence between us. The house felt too small now, and every word felt like a reminder of everything that was broken. Noah didn't reach out again. Part of me wanted him to, but another part of me was relieved he hadn't. I was torn between wanting answers and being too angry to hear any more excuses. I hated him. I should have, but the anger didn't feel like enough. There was something worse, something deeper that gnawed at me. It was the uncertainty, the unknowns that were eating me alive. What did I want? Did I want to fix this mess with Kelly, or was I ready to burn it all down and leave? I couldn't figure it out. One night, I came home earlier than I expected. Kelly was sitting on the couch, her face red from crying. When she saw me, she stood up, but the words she was about to say died in her throat. I stood in the doorway, the weight of everything pressing on me. We just stared at each other for a moment. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words stung, but they didn't have the impact they used to. She'd said them so many times already. It doesn't change anything, I replied. I know, she said, the guilt clear in her eyes. I don't know how to make this right. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I once knew now seemed like a stranger. I felt nothing. I don't know what I want anymore, Kelly, I said, my voice tight. I don't know if I can trust you again. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling. Please, just give me a chance. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I can't. I cut in, my voice steady, though it felt like I was breaking inside. I can't keep pretending. Her face fell, but she didn't argue. She just stood there, defeated. I turned and walked out, not looking back. As I stepped into the night, I realized I didn't have the answers, but I couldn't stay in this limbo anymore. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew I couldn't keep going like this. One thing was clear. I couldn't pretend anymore. The days blurred together after I walked out. I went through the motions, work, the gym, eating alone, but it all felt pointless. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. I tried to stay away from Kelly, but even then, the weight of it all hung over me. I thought about leaving, just packing up and disappearing, but I couldn't bring myself to make that call. I didn't know where to go or what to do. Kelly didn't stop reaching out. Texts, calls, she kept pleading, promising things would change, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. I couldn't believe in her apologies anymore. She had crossed a line, and now the part of me that still cared seemed to be fading with every attempt. One afternoon, I saw Noah at the coffee shop. I spotted him through the window, sitting alone, staring into his cup. I almost walked by, but something made me stop. He didn't notice me, so I kept watching for a moment, weighing whether or not to say something. Without thinking, I walked in. I stood by his table for a second, then slid into the seat across from him. He looked up, surprised. "Hey," he said quietly, a little too casually. We stared at each other. I didn't have to say much. "Why?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze shifting to the window. "I don't know, man. It just happened. I couldn't hide the frustration in my voice. You didn't think about me. You didn't think about what it would do to everything." Noah shifted uncomfortably. "I fucked up. I get that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything." I paused, fighting back the urge to lash out. There was no point in dragging it any further. "I don't know why I'm even sitting here," I muttered. "I came here to yell, but I don't even have the energy for it." His eyes flickered with something. Guilt, regret, but he didn't speak. I could tell he was waiting for me to say something else, but I didn't have anything left. "I don't want anything from you," I said, standing up. "Just stay away from Kelly. Don't pull her into this anymore." Without another word, I walked out. I didn't look back. The conversation didn't change anything. The truth had been laid bare, and facing it didn't make it easier. But it was done. Now I had to figure out what came next. I didn't know where I was going, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep pretending. The night after I saw Noah, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation, every word echoing like a bad recording I couldn't turn off. There was no closure, no sense of justice, just emptiness. I had confronted him, but it didn't make anything better. I thought maybe I'd feel relief, but instead, I felt hollow. The anger that had fueled me for weeks was fading, replaced by something worse: numbness. When I finally dragged myself out of bed the next morning, the house was silent. Kelly was gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm staying at my sister's for a while. I think we both need space." I stared at the note for a long time. No tears, no anger, just a strange calm. Maybe she was right. Space was exactly what we needed. I just wasn't sure if it would fix anything, or if it would finally end us for good. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I worked, came home, ate alone. The house felt foreign without her, cold, but peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. There was no tension, no waiting for another lie, just silence. For the first time, I started to think clearly. About everything. About her, about Noah, about myself. I realized how much I'd been living on autopilot, convincing myself that our marriage was unbreakable, that she loved me enough to never cross that line. I had been wrong. One evening, I went out for a drive. No destination, just the road and my thoughts. The radio was off. The quiet hum of the engine was enough. Somewhere between the city and the empty fields outside town, I pulled over. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I thought about the first time Kelly and I met, how easily we'd fallen into each other's lives. Back then, I couldn't imagine a world where she wasn't by my side. And now? I wasn't sure I could imagine a world where she still was. I finally turned the key and drove back home. The house greeted me with silence again. For the first time, I didn't mind it. I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the couch, and looked at the empty spot beside me. The reality was clear now. There was no fixing what was broken. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, not with her, not with anyone, but with myself. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't closure, but it was the first time in months that I didn't feel like I was drowning. A week passed before Kelly came back. When I saw her car pull into the driveway, I didn't feel the rush of emotions I thought I would. No relief, no anger, just that same empty calm. She stepped out of the car slowly, her movements hesitant, as if she didn't know what kind of welcome she would get. I stayed where I was, on the couch, the TV muted, the familiar silence settling in around me. She came in, and for a second, we just stood there. Neither of us spoke, neither of us moved. The weight of everything hung between us like a wall, and I could feel it pressing down on both of us. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice quiet, uncertain. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what I could say, what was left to say. Instead, I nodded and stood up. The small movements felt heavy, like the space between us was too vast to cross. She sat on the couch, but there was no space between us now. The gap we'd spent months building had been reduced to something fragile, something we both knew could shatter with a single word. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice shaky. "I don't know what else to say." I watched her, noticing the way she avoided my eyes, how her hands fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. She looked like someone who had lost everything. But the worst part was, I wasn't sure if she was talking to me or to herself. "I don't know if I can hear that again," I said, my voice flat. "I don't know if I can keep pretending this is something that can be fixed." The words felt cold, but they were the truth. Kelly's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't wipe them away. She didn't try to explain herself again, didn't offer more apologies. It was like she knew that nothing she said would matter now. What was left to fix? What could we say that hadn't been said already? "We've been broken for a while, haven't we?" I finally said, the realization sitting heavy in my chest. "It's been cracking for months, maybe longer. We just didn't want to admit it." Her face crumpled, and she nodded slowly. "I don't know how we got here. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could make it better, but I couldn't." "You couldn't," I agreed softly. "And I don't know if I can anymore either." The silence stretched again, this time with a finality I couldn't ignore. I didn't want to keep talking in circles, didn't want to drag this out any longer. "I think we both need to move on," I said, my voice firm now. "I don't know what that looks like yet, but this thing we've been doing, it's not working." Kelly looked at me, her expression pained, but there was understanding in her eyes. She knew it too. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, but this time it felt like the last apology, the one that finally released us from whatever was left. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. The weight of everything was too much. Instead, I walked past her, out into the quiet of the house, and let the door close behind me. I didn't have the answers. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. There was just silence. And maybe that was enough, for now. The days after Kelly left were quieter than I expected. The house felt empty, but in a way that gave me space to think. She stayed with her sister, and I kept to myself. I didn't want to fight or keep reliving the same painful conversations. It was clear we'd both reached the end, but neither of us knew how to get there. I decided to pack up some things. It felt like the right move, small steps to regain control. I moved a few things into the guest room, marking the first physical distance between us. I didn't know if it was permanent, but I couldn't keep pretending. I was sitting in the guest room, sorting through old boxes when I heard a knock. Kelly. I didn't respond right away, not knowing what to expect. After a moment, she opened the door. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I set the box aside and nodded. She walked in, sitting down at the edge of the bed. We sat there in silence for a beat. "I don't know how to fix this," she said quietly. "I don't even know if it can be fixed." I couldn't lie to her. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We've been living in the wreckage for too long. I can't pretend it's okay anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes looking down. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." The words were familiar, but they didn't carry the weight they once did. I couldn't feel the same sting. I just watched her, unsure of what to say next. It felt pointless to speak when everything had already been said. "I think we've both known for a while that this was coming," I added quietly. "I don't know what happens now." She stood up slowly, not looking at me. "I'll go. I won't stay here if you don't want me to." I didn't stop her. She walked out, leaving me alone again. The house was silent, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel suffocating. It was just the two of us, broken and uncertain, each trying to figure out what came next. As the door closed behind her, I realized something. The pretending was over. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. The silence in the house was no longer oppressive, it was just space. It wasn't comforting, but it wasn't suffocating either. I didn't have to think about the apologies, the promises. Kelly had gone, and now I was left with whatever was left of myself. I spent my time in fragments, some days feeling almost normal, others like I was floating. Work became a distraction, but even that started to lose its grip. I was just going through the motions. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but the truth was I wasn't ready to face the mess of emotions that was still lingering. Not yet. I never called Kelly. She didn't reach out either. For a while, it felt like we were just two people who had lived in the same space, shared the same life, and were now strangers to each other. There was no anger left, no bitterness. Just the quiet of things being over. One evening, I drove to the place we used to go together. It was a park on the edge of town, quiet and empty, just like everything else in my life now. I sat in the car, staring out at the empty swings. The memories hit harder than I expected. All those moments of us, laughing, talking about the future. Those things felt like they belonged to someone else now. I didn't know how to move forward. It wasn't a matter of forgiveness, because that didn't seem possible. It was about accepting that some things end. Sometimes things break beyond repair, no matter how hard you try. I went home that night, not expecting anything to change. Kelly wasn't there. The space was still as cold and silent as it had been. But for the first time, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel the desperate need to make it right. I just felt free. I wasn't sure what the future held, or if I even wanted to know, but I knew this. Whatever happened next, I would be okay. I didn't need her to fix me. I didn't need Noah's apologies. I only needed time. Time to heal, time to rebuild. I lay down in the quiet of the house, the emptiness feeling less like a weight and more like a possibility. I didn't know where I was headed, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel afraid to find out.